Afternoon all. So we are going to be talking about how to administer virtual networking in Azure today. So what are we going to be looking at based on the learning objectives that we have here? The first one is to configure how to configure virtual network, and from there we'll go ahead to look at network security group. Under the network security group, we are going to be discussing application security group also. So you get to understand what we understand or what we mean by that. Then the last learning objective for this particular course or for this particular module is going to be how to host your domain on Azure DNS. So we are going to be looking at how to host your domain on Azure DNS, then finalize it with the labs. So, like I said, things are changing. You guys are going to be more involved in organizing the lab class. I might have to just make sure when we join, someone else is going to share his or her screen, or I still share, and someone needs to just explain what we have in there. And if there is a need for me to, provide more explanation on any of those particular topic or lab or service or whatever resource we are leveraging on, then I'll just go ahead to, talk about that particular stuff. So that's what we are going to be looking at in this particular module, which is administer virtual networking. Like I said, you need to pay good attention to these. So let's look at how to configure virtual network. We all know what networks are, but the layman definition is interconnection of two or more devices together for communication purposes. And that's the literal definition or the basic definition of networks. Now in Azure, we are not seeing all those cables anymore. We are not seeing all those routers. We are not seeing all the devices. Let me just put it that way. That helps in creating that particular network, that local area network, that wide area network that we are used to on premises. I know back then when you go into the office, they tell you, "Oh, take this cable." The cable is actually crimped with an RJ45. Then you plug it to your system. It's actually plugged to the wall, and on the wall is plugged to a faceplate. But all those faceplates, all those routers, switches, that we have in in the office then are no more there. Rather, they are in the data center now. So just imagine when you go into the office, what you do now, or even at home, you just need to plug in that router, and or modem as people know, call it, and you are leveraging the Wi-Fi, just to connect your devices and the likes. Now, there are a lot of things at the back end that make sure that that connection is possible. We are not seeing all those devices anymore. So that's why in Azure we refer to it as virtual networks. So there's not the network anymore, it's just a virtual network. So there's no difference between the virtual network that we have in Azure and the network that we have on premises. Just that, we are not where those devices are actually, we cannot see those devices anymore. So within these particular learning objectives, we are going to be looking at how to plan our virtual network. And when it comes to planning, we're looking at the IP addresses that we are going to be using, the IPv4, the IPv6, depending on the version that you're using. For people that are not in tech before now, so we have different types of IP addressing. We have the version 4, the version 6, and it's no more difference. People were just like, at some point we'll get to use up the IP version 4. And I'm so sure you guys know about the IP version 4. All those IPs that start with 192.168.0.1, something like that, those are the version 4. The V6 is a little bit different. So we're going to be seeing all those things. So you need to plan those IP addresses before you start assigning them. And I'm going to tell you why, maybe not now, why you need to plan it. So you plan your network, you plan your IP addressing, or let me just say it, because At some point, we are going to be pairing those networks together. And reason being that when you create a virtual network in Azure, that virtual network, only resources within that virtual network are going to be able to access each other. Now, for you to now extend just the same way it works on on-premises, in your house, only devices connected to your Wi-Fi are only able to communicate. You are not going to be able to communicate with devices in other apartments. Now, for you to be able to do that, for you to be able to make sure that those devices that are in different virtual network are able to communicate with each other, then you need to go ahead and pair those networks. So when we want to pair, there must not be conflict in the IP addressing. And that's why you need to have a very solid plan before you start deploying anything when it comes to networking. So, but we'll get there. So we'll talk about how to create the virtual networks. We'll talk about how to create the subnet, what are subnets. We'll get there. Then when you create your IP addressing, you now associate it. How do we associate? How do we allocate? And we'll just take a look at the demonstration on how to create all these services that I've been talking about. Yeah, so let's go ahead to talk about how to plan the virtual network. But before we do that, what's a virtual network? Like I said, it's the same network that you have on premises, but now it's virtual because we don't have access to the devices that makes up that particular network. Now, it's a logical representation of your network. So you can see we've got virtual networks in Azure. We've got our on-premises, and there is a communication, or there is, a way we can actually integrate, or let's say extend our virtual network in Azure to the on-premises network. So, and that's what you can see here. Yes, is being recorded. Yeah, automatically you can find them on my YouTube, or even with the LinkedIn space. All right, so now we've got the virtual network. Now let's talk about subnet. Yeah.
Papa Femi. Yeah,
TJ.
sorry for interrupting you. Yeah, I would just I hope the volume will be better this time around.
Yeah. Yes.
You
Yes.
know,
I I I
yeah,
I sorted that. I hope, but I think I've sorted that.
because last week class was also very low. I was literally
Yeah,
struggling with that.
I think I've sorted that. It was due to, I had to check this today, and I noticed it was due to, just give me a minute. Let me see.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's bad, but I'll just continue working on it though. Well, I'm not sure it's bad from what I can hear from the LinkedIn now. Um, I'll just continue working on it. I think, like I said, I need to change the software I'm using. It looks more like it's an issue with the OBS, but still looking for an option or replacement. Okay,
Right.
so like I said, we've got the virtual network. We understand what the virtual network means now. Um, Once we understand what the network means, like when we pair two or more devices together for communication purposes, now the virtual one, because they're actually in the cloud and we do not have access to the devices. Now, when you have a network, you cannot directly associate your devices with that particular network. So you need to divide that particular network into chunks. And when I say you divide it into chunks, is you need to subnet it. So when you subnet your network, because now we are dividing them into multiple networks. So we'll say we are subnetting. Now, when you subnet within each subnet, so let's say you have, because what's going on is when you create a network, you have what we call the address space. So that means the number of devices you can accommodate within that network, that you can associate with within the particular network. Now, you can now, let's say we have 70 address spaces or address space within that particular network. That means If I say I want to divide this particular network into two, then I can create two different subnets that have 35 address space each. So when we divide that particular network into one or more subnets, is what we call subnetting. Now within that subnet is now where you associate, or where you have your resources. Now, even when you've divided your network into subnets, resources within that network, regardless of the subnet they can still communicate with each other by default. By default, they can still communicate with each other. Do not forget that when we create a network, a virtual network, all resources within that virtual network automatically by default are able to communicate with each other. So even when you divide that particular network into subnets, they are still able to communicate. However, those devices are not going to be able to communicate with devices outside that virtual network, except if you pair or extend that particular network either to the on-premises environment or pair it to a different virtual network within the Azure environment. But we'll get there. So now that's what you can see here. A dedicated private cloud-only virtual network. Only devices within a cloud are able to communicate. You are not going to be able to communicate with your device or your laptop on on-premises, except you go ahead to extend that particular network. Now, and that's what we call the cloud hybrid scenario. But we'll get there. Now, this is how we create a network. For now, I think you just have this picture in your head, but we'll still go back there. It's the same way we create other resources also in Azure. You have where we have the basic tab where you put in subscription, resource group. We all understand that there is no way you can actually create any resource in Azure without having a subscription, without having a resource group. At least there are some things that needs to be added. Region, location, so important. There is no way you can create, even when you are leveraging CLI, PowerShell. When you want to create all those resources, you need to add all those things. The location is important, the name, the resource group, the subscription. At least these ones needs to be added, and that's what we have under the basic. Now you can create different virtual network, new one at any point in time. You can add virtual network when you're creating a resource. So when you are creating a resource that needs a virtual network, even when you do not have a virtual network created initially, you can actually create that virtual network in that process. But that's not the best way, because we're talking about you planning your network. So I'll rather create my network, my virtual network first, before I start adding resources to it, so that that can actually be properly planned. And then while you're creating this, you need to define the address space. I talked about the address space also, where depending on the address space, it determines what that particular network can actually accommodate, and at least one subnet. So there is no way you can create a virtual network without having a subnet. When we finally get to DevOps and you are creating all these resources using um, IAC, like infrastructure as a code tool, like Terraform, OpenTofu, ARM templates, Bicep, and the likes, you're going to clearly see all these embedded resources. So you might not even see them when you're actually doing this from the portal, but you're going to see them because you need to state them when you're leveraging on IAC. So you're going to see a lot of things, even the subnet ID and the likes, which are not even here. So that's why I love leveraging IAC when creating all these resources. And you need to always check for overlapping addresses. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You can have the same network with 196 or 192.168.0.0 within your network, within your environment. However, when you do that, you are not going to be able to pair those networks together, because we've got overlapping address spaces. So you need to be very careful when you are creating your network. So let's go there. Now, these are just subnet. And what are subnet? When you segment your network into one or more, subnets. And that's what we call, the subnet. So what we're trying to do is we'll say we just want to divide this particular network into chunks. I rather not put all my system or my resources into one subnet. Why not just create them into multiple subnets so we know which resource goes into this particular subnet. And like I said, when you have different subnet created and you have those resources within different subnet, those resources are still able to communicate regardless of the subnet where they are, or regardless of where they are still able to communicate, because communication within the virtual network automatically is allowed to all the resources within the same VNet. But we are going to see why. We are going to see why when we start talking about network security group, which is the NSG. I think it's the next one after this one. So, but you should understand that, we're just trying to divide our network into logical group, and that's what we refer to as subnet. And you can see it helps with better security performance, because you might want to have just virtual machines attached to this one, and have some other resources here. You do not want to put the same resource scattered around each of the subnet, because you want to apply some security rules on this particular subnet. So it might be one of the reasons why you want to separate your subnet or your network, or divide them into chunks so, and that's what we have here. IP addressing space. Now I've just told you guys that you need to always plan, but before we start talking about how to plan those IP addressing, let's even talk about those IP addressing for people that are new. When your devices communicate within your your network, let's say you turn on your Wi-Fi and you're able to connect but not able to browse the internet. With that, now even all devices connected to that particular network, even when there are no internet, they are still able to communicate with each other. You can share folders, files between those. A typical example would be the file share for people that have used Android before. If you download Zenda, yes, Zenda. I don't know if you guys have used it, and it's going to tell you to turn off Wi-Fi, everything, because it wants to create its own network. So what's happening is, at the time you are able to share, APK or some Android files between two devices, between two phones, because those particular devices are on the same network at that particular time. They're on what we call the private network, because they are not open to the internet. They are not open to public. They are not open, to the web. So at that time, we'll say what you've created is a private network. And at that point in time, what you are going to be assigned is what we call the private IP address. But when we have these open to the internet, open to the web, open to public, then at that point in time, your device needs what we call the public IP address. So that's the difference. So you do not really need to. So from what I was trying to say is, when you create a virtual network in Azure, and those resources within the same network are able to communicate, they are not communicating over the public internet. They are communicating over the private, IP, private network, because they are actually within the same network. But when it's time for that particular machine to surf the web, then you need what we call the IP, the public IP, to be able to do that. So you need, so that's it. So you can see the VNet. We have even your on-premises network. When you communicate within that, it's open to just private IP address. But when you face the internet, when the resource is actually solving, public facing services, or you have some public facing services within your device, and you need, resources from outside that particular network to be able to communicate, then there's a need for you for public IP address. So just the same way we create our virtual network is the same way we have to create our public IP address. But the only thing is there are some, you know, properties that might be different, or there might be some additional properties. But like I was saying the other time, we have the IPv4, IPv6 public IP addresses. And one of the reasons why they had to create the IPv6 was because they were so afraid that we were going to use up the IPv4. I think it was in 2011 or something that the IPv4 almost got used up. So there was a need for a new one. Now you can see the SKU. We all understand when we come to SKU, we are talking about what option. Sometimes it might be size for some of the resources. Sometimes it might just be the type. It might be premium, standard. But the SKU is just telling us what kind of resource are you deploying. Then you can have your public IP address dynamically assigned, or you want it to be set to static. And what does that mean? Let's say you have a website. Let me tell you one thing about all these web applications that we access now. For those web applications, they're actually on a server. They're actually hosted on a server, regardless of the kind of service we are leveraging on. You're leveraging on app service. You're leveraging on on let's say Kubernetes service. You have your application wrapped in a container and hosted in container app, container instance, or you are even hosting, like I said, on the app service, serverless like Lambda or functions in Azure. The underlying workload is still a machine. It's still a machine. That's the underlying workload. So for all these AKS, all these container apps, instance, functions, web apps that we'll talk about at a later stage, they are still leveraging virtual machines, or let's say machines. But at some point, some of them are platform as a service. Some of them are, if you are actually, leveraging, let's say what's so some of them are platform and some of them are IaaS. So depending on the kind of service you have actually ordered for. So for all these, like I said, everything is still on the virtual machine. Now, when you try to access that particular web application, that web application, computer doesn't understand the google.com you are typing in. The computer only understands the 0 and 1. And if you go back to the time we were learning digits, is 0 and 1, computer languages, we always have something like 192.168.0.1, and that forms, so that's when we are able to create it from the 0 and 1. So we'll go back to byte and bit or something like that. So all these IP addresses that you currently have is what we have as is what the computer understands. Now, the computer, like I said, doesn't understand the google.com they are typing in. So that google.com is actually associated with an IP address. And what IP address is that? Is the IP address of the virtual net machine, or the machine where that particular web application is hosted on. But you don't need to know the IP address of that machine, since you understand, or since you know the google.com domain. So when you want to access google.com, you just type in google.com and it takes you there. Now, what's happening is we have what we call the domain name system, which we are going to talk about here also. The domain name system, we have protocols on there, under there, which convert that particular google.com, that domain, to what the computer understand, which is the 0 and 1. The 0 and 1, makes up the IP address we are talking about, the 192.168.0.1 or something like that. Same thing when the computer wants to give you that information, there is always a conversion also from that particular IP address back to that domain. Talk about, for people that have been into networking before, we talk about the ARP, Address Resolution Protocol, RARP, Reverse Address Resolution Protocol. But that's not the main thing here, though. So, but what I'm trying to, talk about here is, when you have that particular application now I told you that the domain is associated with a particular IP address. That IP address must not change if you are actually hosting a web application on that particular workload. You do not want it to change, even when every time there might be. So you rather just make it a static IP address. Now that's the case. But if you are not hosting anything on it, you are not hosting a web application, there is no need for you to keep that IP. But the only thing is, if you don't keep the IP, let's say you are actually remoting into that particular virtual network, every time the lease period is elapsed, a new IP address is assigned to that virtual machine. Then you need to now go back to check which IP address has been assigned. That's going to be a little bit tedious every time your IP address keeps changing, So you have the option to be able to pick if you want a dynamic public IP address or a static IP address, so for the static, that belongs to you until you finally delete it, but for the dynamic, it changes after every lease period. So once the lease period for that particular IP address is elapsed, a new IP address is assigned to you. So we have the dynamic, we have the static. And the last one here you can see is the Microsoft versus internet routing. So when we talk about the routing, we are talking about what's this traffic movement, what's the traffic flow, what's the IP flow within your network. Now, when we talk about traffic, I'm talking about the fact that when people are surfing the internet, when people are browsing the internet, now, whatever they are requesting, where is it coming from? Where is it going to? And that's what we talk about the traffic. So when I talk about the traffic, what I mean is the request. So when you try to get anything from Google, you're trying to request. Though we've got some different terms for it, but we'll get there, But here, the understanding is the traffic coming in are the requests we are actually making. So we are trying to get something from Google. We are making a request. I want to solve this particular internet. I just want to visit this particular web application or website to read some news on maybe go.com. I'm making a request. So when you make a request, we're talking about, you are pushing traffic. Now, the routing preference now talk about how do we route this particular traffic coming in. So you can decide to say Microsoft take the lead. Whatever Microsoft has configured within their environment, should be the routing preference within my environment. Or I want to have it as internet routing. That means once the traffic comes in, where is it going to hit first before it even get to the workload, where the request will be attended to, or do you just want to route this to the internet? Maybe anything I want to solve here, if I want to check anything now, it should just go directly to the internet, or should it go to a firewall I've created before it gets to the internet? So if you are choosing your own, at some point we are going to be creating our own route table. We are going to be the one to decide how the traffic within the environment, where they are going to be routed to, regardless of where they are coming from. So we're going to talk about routing within, the environment. So, but when you're creating a public IP address, you can decide to choose, Microsoft network routing or, the internet. Now, let's now talk about how we associate these public IP addresses. When we create a virtual machine or on our laptop, by default, it comes with an address based on the card within that particular system. We call it the NIC card. I'm so sure you guys might have heard that in the past. Now, this is where we have the physical address. So, or let's say the MAC address. I'm so sure you might have seen a MAC address before. But when there is a need for you to now connect, maybe via private or public network, then an IP address needs to be assigned to you. So if you are leveraging private network, a private IP address is going to be assigned to you. So you're going to see something like 10.0.0.0, but that same IP address cannot be used when you want to solve the internet. So when you want to solve the internet, you need a public IP address. So the main objective for this particular slide you're seeing is where within our resource are we going to associate the IP address, the public IP address. For a virtual machine, we'll need to associate it, or it's associated on what we call the NIC, which is the network interface card. So either you want to associate it, either the IP address being dynamic or static, it's still going to be the same. We have what we call the load balancer. A very typical way to explain a load balancer is when you go to the train station, they've got different barriers, ticket barriers now. All you need to do is to scan your ticket or, scan your card. But the main goal is to get to the platform. So we've got so many barriers, but the main goal, like I said, is to get to the platform. Now, what they're trying to do is, if it's just one barrier or one way in, there's going to be traffic. Why are we not segregating or separating the way the traffic comes into our resource? So we create what we call a load balancer to balance the traffic coming in. So that's a typical example. Or let's say you're in a building and that building has got 3 different doors. Now, because we've got 1,000 people coming into that building, we'd say 300 of you should go through the back door, 400 of you should go through the front door. There's a side door also you guys can actually go through. So what we've done there is to divide that particular traffic coming into that particular house, to make sure that there is no traffic, and that's what a load balancer does. We've got different types of load balancers, and we're going to be talking about them also. I think that's the next module. We talk about the application gateway, traffic manager, and the likes. The layer 4 load balancers we can see, but we'll get there. So I just explained what a load balancer does. Where do we associate this? A load balancer has, just like the NIC for the virtual network, virtual machine, what we call the front-end configuration, and that's where we associate the IP addresses to. Same thing goes with the application gateway, which is a special type of load balancer only for application. Is a layer 7 load balancer. So we have all these layers: layer 4 network, layer 3, layer 1, so physical layer, layer 1, and the like. So a layer 7 is the application layer, and that's where the application gateway operates. It's also a load balancer. VPN gateway. For VPN gateway, we are talking about what are even VPN? We are talking about the virtual private network. Now, you work from home, but you need to connect to resources within the Azure environment. How do you connect? How how are you going to be able to solve or connect or access those resources? Now you need to test some things, but you need to access, so your key vault or your storage account within Azure has been deployed, you know, and not open to the internet, but you need to access it. So we need a connection from the Azure environment to your machine, that you're actually using. So we have the VPN, which create what we call the virtual private network. And what it does is to put your machine, your system, your laptop, and that resource in Azure that you are trying to connect within the same network. And we've talked about the fact that when two resources are within the same network, they are able to communicate. So we need what we call the VPN to be able to, leverage that. So the VPN gateway is just like a device, a virtual device in Azure that extends network from our Azure environment to our on-premises environment. So regardless of if it's just your system or a whole building, all systems in a whole building, it's still we extending it to an on-premises because your laptop doesn't exist in the cloud. So, and that's why when you connect to a VPN, you are able to access some services, some resources within your organization. When you don't connect, you are not able to connect, and that's the thing. It's just logical. But when you go to the office, they'll tell you there is no reason for you to connect to a VPN anymore because you're in the office. So you're able to connect to all those devices, to all those resources in Azure. And reason being that there is a VPN connectivity in the office already, which is connected to the office internet or to the office network. And that's why when you go into the office, they tell you there is no need for you to connect to the VPN. But when you're at home, there is a must. So we'll talk about different types of VPN that we have in Azure. We'll look at different types also. If not in this module, it will be in the next one, you know. So, but we need that particular gateway to extend that virtual network in Azure to our on-premises environment. So where do we associate the public IP address to? And that's the gateway IP configuration. Cool. Now, we've talked about associating public IP addresses. What about the private IP addresses? Do you notice something that we don't have the VPN gateway anymore? Because we are trying to keep whatever we have within the Azure resource now, the Azure environment now. So we have the virtual machine still having the static or dynamic. Oh, there's something I didn't explain here. If you go back to these associate public IP addresses, you would see the VPN gateway and the application gateway. For the static, there is an asterisk in front of or at the top of that yes. It's nothing. It's just saying it is not available for all type of SKU. It only exists in some certain SKU, and that's it. So let's go back to allocate or assign private IP addresses. So same virtual network machine, NIC, or load balancers, the internal load balancers, what external load balancer. So when we talk about the internal load balancer, now we're talking about how to load balance or a service that is load balancing within the Azure resources now, and not just load balancing traffic coming from outside the Azure environment. Now, this one works with or within, the Azure environment. Just resources like your virtual machine is trying to access the database. Now we've got so many virtual machines trying to access that database at the same time. Now we can create what we call a load balancer and add more database or databases at the back end and load balance those traffic coming from those virtual machines to different load balance to different databases also. So we do not just want all those machines to be accessing the same database. So if we leverage on load balancing or load balancer in that case, so would say yes, that's we just leveraging on the internet load balancer. The same thing goes with the application gateway. Like I've explained, this is a special type or an application load balancer, you know. So just leave it that way. But I know in the next module we are going to be talking about application gateway specifically. Or is it within this? But we'll get there. So we are now being asked to create whatever we've been talking about. Yes, Shell.
Hi, Femi.
Yes, one of you needs to.
Sorry, I'm coming. Let me mute my mic.
One of you needs to mute.
That was me. Have you muted?
You want to mute and come back. I can still hear the echo though.
Hello?
Yes. Oh, still the same thing though.
I'll come back.
Okay, no problem. That sounded right. Can you try it
Hello?
again? Yeah. Okay, let's go. It's still the same thing, but we can. I think we can. So the thing is, there are two speakers there. That's the problem. Let's mute it and you come back to it, please. Okay, so let's see. This is still loading, please. Now I just want to create a virtual network. The best way I do this is just to search for it here. Even when you can actually click on create your network, create a resource from here, or um, you try to use the icon there, the hamburger icon there. But for me, I just search whatever I want to create, and we'll create a virtual network. Now, a lot of things, like I said, when you're creating your network, there are a lot of things that needs to be considered. The IP addressing, how many subnets you want to have, the IP space, the address space in there, and the likes. So let's hold on. Why is this always loading slow? Just give me a minute. I don't know why I keep having this issue. It's taking all the time. Oh my. Hmm. I'll just come back to this, please. This is going to take. I'll just drag this to the other side.
Hello, Femi.
Yes.
Yes. Apologies for the interruption previously. So I just want to ask, um, can we say that the major difference between the private and public virtual network is the VPN? I'm just asking.
No. Major difference is the fact that one is open to the public, like the name sound, is open to the
Okay.
internet. When you have that connection to the internet, when you have that interaction to the internet. So just the same way I would say this is a private property, meaning only those household can actually, go into that particular property. Then you have something like the mosque, the church, where everyone can access. Do you understand?
Okay.
Now, the
Okay.
major difference is the fact that you have it open to the internet. Anyone can actually connect to that particular network or try to access those resources. Just the same way we try to access Google. Google is open to the public. Now, same Google, we have some internal applications that are not open to the public that are used within the environment, like the HR application and the likes. Do you understand? That's the same way the private and the public IP, public network, can be distinguished.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Let's see. I'm still trying to see if perfect. Now, um, I'm just going to be creating this guy to create a virtual network. Like you guys saw the other time, we need to have like at least a subscription, then a resource group. You can create a resource group while you're actually creating a new resource within the environment. We need a name, a region. The next thing will be the security. Now, if you want to encrypt the Azure Bastion, we'll talk about it. Let's say you do not want public IP address within the environment, and what you are trying to do is to make sure, and you still want to connect to that device. Now, you have a laptop, but you want to log into a virtual machine you have created in Azure. You want to RDP into it. RDP goes over what we call the public internet, because what you are trying to do is you are trying to log in from a system that doesn't exist within your network. You are trying to log in from your laptop, and you are trying to log into a machine that exists within the Azure environment. You need to go over a public IP address, but you do not want to enable a public IP address because of the vulnerability associated with it. So you can create what we call the Azure Bastion, and that Azure Bastion gives you the leverage or gives you the ability to be able to access those machines without needing a public IP address. We'll get there. Then the firewalls, we'll talk about the firewalls. When I start explaining the NSG, which is the network security group, which is like a mini firewall, you will explain what firewall, you understand what firewall means. But firewalls, what you are trying to do is just to filter out the traffic that comes in to your network. So you can actually use the firewall to protect your virtual network in Azure or network resources in Azure. But we are not checking any of this. Then here is the main thing. I talked about the fact that you've been assigned a public, when you want to create a virtual network, you need to assign or associate the address space. Now, you need to plan this carefully. You need to plan it carefully. Now, by planning it carefully is to make sure that whatever IP address you're actually adding here does not conflict with the ones that you already have within the environment. Just the same way, this guy is telling me that this address that you want to use for this particular network overlaps with a different network. Now, I can go ahead to do that and create it. It's going to create. But if I intend to pair those two networks, let's say I've created a different virtual machine now, and I want that virtual machine to be able to communicate with any virtual machine I've created within this particular network. I'm not going to be able to do it because there is a conflict, there is an address overlap. So I do not want to create an address overlap. I'd rather just create something like 10.1. Oh, I've got another one, 10.6. Now, 10.6 doesn't overlap with anything, with anyone. So it doesn't have to be just 10.6. You can have lots of other IP addresses. You can see this thing starts from 10.0.0.0, meaning it's 0.0.0.0, meaning you can have up to 255, 255, 255, 255. You know the number of addresses that we currently have. Now, within this space now, you can have up to 65,000 address space. Now, meaning you can have up to 65,000 resources associated to this particular virtual network. I can change that. We use what we call the CIDR, classless routing domain. But don't worry about that jargons. Yeah, it's just we saying, instead of me saying, oh, this particular network has 70 address space, then I start from 10.0.0.1, 10.0.0.2, 10.0.0.3 to 70. I rather just use something to represent it. And that's where this slash 23, what we call the CIDR, comes from. Slash 23, it just tells you within this space you got 512 slash 27. Within this space you've got only 32 addresses. Instead of me saying 0.1 to 0 till I get to slash 33, this one just tells me, yeah, you've only got this. Now, yes, I've got my IP address now, and I need to now create at least one subnet. At least one subnet. This address space is telling me, you can see I won't be able to create it because it's saying this guy doesn't even exist here, because you can see this subnet has got 256 and the real VNet has got just 32 addresses. So how am I going to have 256 subnets created out of 32? So if I want to do that, I need to reduce this guy maybe to 16. So when you want to create your VNet, you don't create your VNet based on what you currently have. Let's say, oh, we just have 16 staffs, we just have 16 or 30 persons working within this particular environment. Let's just create slash 32. That's enough for them. What if tomorrow, you're actually looking at employing, more staff, like employing maybe 10 other persons to that particular environment, then there is no way you will be able to extend anymore. You cannot change the except you go and associate a different IP address range. But with that, I'd rather just say, okay, because this is 32, let's move this to slash 26, which can actually accommodate 64. Even if we are just using 30 out of the 30 of the 64 now, as we continue to go, we've got more space, to accommodate more resources. This is not trying to, so I'll just rather put this back to slide 23. Now, because I've put this back to slide 23, you can see that there is that warning sign has disappeared, because these particular 256 addresses has now been contained within or embedded within this particular one. Now, if I create a new or a different subnet, because out of the 512, I've only been able to create this particular subnet using 256, or I've allocated just 256 addresses to this subnet. So I can still create another subnet and still allocate the remaining 256. So I can have two subnets here. I can still reduce this. Why is this thing always taking all the time? I can also reduce this to maybe just to have like 20 or 24 or 64 address space each within the subnet. I don't know why this is. I keep getting this issue. So that's how we can create this subnet out of here. I'm just going to continue here. Let me just create the name, and I say test class. I'll just create it, and let's see. I will edit that one later. The tag needed, we'll talk about tagging later. And no, I don't want to use. How did I get there? Oh my. Okay, so I'm just going to use one of the ones I created. Let's say we've been able to create, and is this test. So like I said, you can still go back there to edit the subnet, to add more subnets, to even remove the the ones you have. So it all depends on what you're trying to do. As far as the address space you have initially or you created initially can still accommodate for more subnet or for more resources. I don't know what's going on, but I think we've been able to at least see how we can actually create a virtual network. It's nothing though. It's just you putting those properties in there. Same thing goes with the subnet. And that's the same way we create the public IP address. You can just try it. I don't know why my network has always been, maybe it's my network, maybe it's my Azure environment, and it's been crazy of late. So let's move on and talk about the network security group. We've been talking about the fact that the resources within our virtual network can actually communicate with each other since they are within the same virtual network. Now, we've actually separated those networks or that network logically by creating subnets. Now, that's just we dividing that virtual network into chunks. We've added as subnet 1, subnet 2, subnet 3, subnet 4, as you could see in the previous slide I shared. But I want to make sure that the virtual machine within this subnet 1 are not able to talk to the virtual machines in subnet 2. Yes, I can do that. What I would do is to add what we call the NSG and associate it with subnet 1. Now, what the NSG does, like I said the other time, is just a mini firewall just to filter, traffic coming into the environment and traffic going out of the environment or out of the resource that we have in there. So when you configure what we call the network security group, you're trying to filter out whatever traffic that you have. So it's either you want to filter out traffic coming in or traffic coming out. Now, once I created an NSG and associated with that subnet 1, then if I'm blocking access, then that means other resources within that same virtual network will not be able to communicate with those resources within that subnet 1. Initially I told you by default all resources are able to communicate with each other regardless of where they are, regardless of the subnet they are. But we can also filter this out. We can also make changes to these by creating what we call an NSG, which we call the network security group, and associate that NSG to that subnet. What if I want resources from outside that my subnet to communicate with virtual networks within my subnet 1, but I just want to restrict their access to just one virtual network? So if I block that on the subnet level, then I'm blocking access to all the virtual machines within that subnet 1. But I can do that by associating that NSG I've created, not with the subnet now, but with the NIC card of that virtual machine that I want to block access to. So this brings me to the summary that says NSG can only be associated with subnet or NIC card. So it's a typical question they can ask you during interview and tell you which resource in Azure can you associate an NSG to or a NSG to. So you guys understand that your NSG can only be associated with a subnet or NIC card of a virtual machine. So let's look at it. So these are just, I'd rather just go back to my Azure environment. I cannot explain this. I don't want to explain this using. So NSG are security rules that you've created within the environment, within your environment to filter out traffic, either traffic coming in to that particular resource or traffic going out to that particular resource. I'm trying to just pick my virtual machine, one of them, my virtual machine, and that will make or help me to explain, so I'm gonna pick this one. I hope it works this time. Um, so while I'm just talking about this, okay, so network security group, network settings. I hope. Okay, that's still loading. Why that is loading? So just understand that network security group, which we call the NSG, contains set of goals that are used in filtering out traffic, either traffic coming into the resource or traffic going out of that particular resource. Resource can be a subnet, resource can be the virtual machine itself. So we can create NSG rules to prevent those traffic. And once we are done with that NSG, we look at what we call the ASG, which we call the application security group. Now, I was talking about the fact that your NSG can be assigned to your subnet or associate with have it associated with your NIC card. That means you can prevent access to a particular virtual machine or access to all the resources within a particular subnet. What if I want to prevent access to only 5 virtual networks? Oh, sorry, only 5 virtual machines out of the 30 I have in subnet 1. Does that mean that I need to create NSG for each of these guys and associate it to their NIC card? No, I can leverage what we call the ASG, which is the application security group. So this is me logically grouping all these machines together based on the service they provide or based on the application they actually or let's say based on the application that is actually on them, or running on them or something like that. So, but this is logically grouping those machines together, because I do not want to start assigning those NSG, those network security group, one after the other to those machines. So I can actually have these 5 machines and assign what we call the ASG. So that ASG, you've logically grouped everything together, then you can now assign an NSG on that, on those machines at the same time. So you do not want to segregate them. You do not want to add them, or assign that NSG one after the other to them. But you can create what we call the ASG. Assign all these machines to that ASG, then assign your NSG to it. Yeah, TJ.
Yeah, sorry. Aside the fact, of creating the ASG group, can you also like create another subnet just for those 5 virtual machine as alternative to
Yes,
creating?
yes, you can do that. But what if you've associated it with that subnet, and do you want to start moving them when you can have a service you can leverage on? Do you understand? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good option also, where you have a subnet created just for those machines,
Yeah.
and associate that. But what if they're not within the same subnet?
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yeah. Yeah.
What if they are not within the same subnet, but they have to be within the same virtual network? Do you
Yeah.
understand? If you are leveraging ASG, but they can be within different subnets. Do you understand?
Mm.
So
Mm.
so you
Yeah.
don't want to start moving all of them to the same subnet. So you can use the ASG in that regard. So understanding those explanations, should be enough. But we'll get there. So NSG, like I've said, is a list of security rules that allows or deny inbound and outbound network traffic. It can be associated to subnets or network interface, you know, and can be associated multiple times. Yes, you can have one NSG assigned to 10 different subnets, more than 10, the same way, we have ASG also associated with multiple um, NSG and the likes. So But the main thing is trying to limit traffic to a resource within a virtual network. So it's either the one coming in, which is the inbound, or the one going out, which is the outbound. So we'll see. This is how the NSG looks like. It's on the virtual machines. If you guys have got any virtual machines you've created, I don't know why my Azure is not. I need to raise a ticket too. It's been like this for a while now. I've been struggling to always get into my resources. Yeah, maybe it's high time. Okay, so let's just continue. I might not be able to show you so many things today. But this is how your NSG looks like. These are NSG rules. These are the rules we're talking about. We said NSG is collection of rules, which are used to limit traffic. So what you're trying to do here is to say, okay, lovely. Yep. Now, my NSG here is associated to my network interface. It's associated to this particular virtual machine and not on the subnet. Now you can see here, zero subnet, one network interface. So you have the inbound and the outbound, just the same way you can actually see this on the PowerPoint slide. Now, because I need to access this particular machine from outside this network, I need to create what we call, a rule that will allow traffic. Because why am I doing that? Why am I allowing this? Because by default, Azure is going to put these three rules by default. When you create a virtual machine, when you create, a virtual machine or an NSG, Azure is going to have these three rules created automatically. And you can see that's why they are grayed out. I cannot even, edit them. I can't. And we were talking about the fact that, oh, when you create a resource or when you have resources within the same virtual network, they are able to talk to each other. Why are they able to talk to each other? Because there is an NSG, or there is a rule that has been created that allows resources within the same virtual network to be able to talk to each other. And that rule is the rule with the 65,000 priority, which allow VNet outbound from any virtual network to this virtual network. So all resources within the same virtual network, this is why they're able to communicate, And why are they able to communicate with the internet? Because there's another rule that says allow internet outbound, from any protocol, from any ports, from any source to the internet. All these protocols you can see, now you can see there is a particular port, because RDP, if I want to access my machine in Azure or even my machine on premises, I need this port to be open. Something about computing is we always have one port or the other open. It's just the same way if you want to access a Mac system or a Linux system, we need, we say we SSH to it. We need that port 22 to be open, and that's the SSH port. If you want to access the internet, we have this particular port, which is the HTTP port and HTTPS port. For the HTTP port is port 80. I think one of the labs, when you get there, I don't know if it's on the Azure Fundamental or the Azure Administrator, it's going to tell you to host a web application, then allow access to that particular web application. So that system wasn't open to allow traffic to come into that particular web application because the port wasn't open. Now, for you to open that port, you need that port 80 to be functioning, and that port 80 is the HTTPS port. Sorry, is the HTTP port. Now, if you want to add security to that particular web application, to that, where you leverage the HTTPS, then you need the port 443 to be open. So, like I said, everything about computing is port, port, port. But don't worry yourself about the ports. You understand all those, and you don't need to count them. But I know that, for me to RDP into this machine, I need that port 3389 to be open. But why do I need to come and put it here? Because there is a rule, the 65,500 rule, automatically deployed by Microsoft, that says deny all inbound traffic coming into this particular application or to this particular virtual machine from any port, from any protocol, from any source, from any destination. Deny everything. And that's why they had to create this other tool, which allows, resources within the same virtual network to be able to communicate, which allows resources within your virtual network to be able to talk to the internet, or, to have it load balance within each other. Now, for you to now override this particular one, you need to create a different rule with an higher priority. And when we talk about the higher priority, the lower the number, the higher the priority. The lower the number, the higher the priority. And that's why you can see this number is lower compared to this guy. This one is 65,500. And this guy is 65,001. So this guy takes the priority over this guy. So once this one is put into consideration, this is never checked anymore. So the same thing goes with this guy. Once this one is checked, this is not checked. Once this one is checked, this is not going to be checked. Do you understand? So if I want to create another one, inbound, then I need to set the priority. There is no other number after this guy. But if I go ahead and say I want to have the same thing that has been created here, which is deny all inbound, maybe I want to allow all inbound now. Then I went to create another allow all inbound, but the action now says deny, and I put it on port 100, and I put it on priority 100, which is the number. I put it at 100. Anyone below this, on that particular 100, will not take effect. Everything will be blocked, because that's what needs to be checked first. So the lowest number you can go here is 100. The highest number you can go is the 500. But know that anything that has been set on 100 takes the precedence, like it's the one with the highest priority. So once that is checked, no other rule is going to be checked. So you need to have that. And so this is what the NSG looks like. So for every traffic that you want to filter out, you need to create a rule. So I can decide to say I only want communication from this particular machine. Then when I'm creating my rule, I would say, I hope this loads fast. Oh, nice. So I would say I just want it from this particular IP address. Then I say only machines. So if I do this 168.0.2, this is only going to allow traffic coming from this particular machine. If any other machine is trying to access this particular machine, it's not going to allow, because I've created a rule, maybe to block other ones, but only allow this guy. You understand? So you can decide to have it from this particular IP address. So you can see my own IP address, no other. So if I do this, I would only be the one that will access this particular machine. But because my laptop uses the dynamic IP addressing, next time this will change and I will not be able to access this machine. Then I need to go in there again to change this particular, source IP. Doesn't make any sense. So you can do this also using a service tag saying anyone from the internet, anyone from this virtual network, anyone from this action group and the likes, should be able to access. So once that is done, there are also other definition or destination also. Destination will be maybe only this particular machine. Don't forget, we can associate this particular NSG not just for this machine. I can also associate this NSG to another machine also, to another subnet. So you can associate it with multiple. And that's why he's asking me, why is he not picking the IP address of this machine? And that's why he's not picking it. Because this guy doesn't own this NSG. The only thing is I just associated it with the NIC card of this machine. I can deassociate it. So you need to set, if it's just for this machine, I will set the IP address of this machine here. And any traffic will only go into this machine, regardless of if I've associated this NSG with multiple machines. The traffic will not reach the destination. Only the traffic, that is for this guy will get to this guy. So it's just you trying to filter stuff. Like I said, the lowest number you can go is 100, and that's why you can see this guy is telling you don't pick any other thing. Priority can only be between this guy and this guy. So if you try to go more, you're not going to. And these are typical questions that come out during interviews or during test. So the name you give it doesn't matter, but it's always nice when you label it well and put in some descriptions. Yep. So I would go back to my. Just give me a minute. Yep. So that's it. Like I said, there are default security rules created by Microsoft that cannot be deleted or changed. You can only add other rules with higher priority. So you can see all I need to do is just to add a different rule, allow the action or deny it, then make sure that the priority I've set is higher than the ones that has been created by Microsoft by default. So now we talked about the fact that we can associate an NSG with a subnet, and we can also associate it with the NIC card of a machine. It all depends on what we are trying to do. The same way we can associate it with the machine, the NIC card, and still associate it with the subnet. But once that comes into play, how is the traffic? Let's say we've allowed that particular traffic on the subnet and we deny it on the NIC card. Anyone, are we still going to be able to access that particular, or is the traffic going to go through? It's being allowed on the subnet but denied on the NIC card, or the other way around, is being denied on the subnet and allowed on the NIC card. From what you can see, or from what I've explained, do you think the traffic is still going to get to the virtual machine? Anyone? You just need to try. Oh my.
And that's the completing
I don't think
and
it
that's the
will.
completing rules.
That's what?
I don't think so, because it's the
think
card
think
should.
think is not what I take though. You don't go to interviews and say I don't think so. Don't try it. Remove the think. If you want to be sure, you sure. You get. You tell me you no. Yes, don't use think. Abraham. Come
No,
on. Yeah.
no,
Why? Why do you feel is no?
because the traffic's supposed to go through the card.
Yeah.
So if the card is not there, then or it's not
So that's
allowed,
it.
then the traffic
Lovely.
cannot go.
Yeah. So like you can see, NSG are independently evaluated. Do you understand? So it needs to be on allow on both levels before the traffic can actually go to. So once it's denied on any of the levels, let's say it's denied on the NIC card now, gets into the subnet, but it doesn't get into the it won't be able to get into the machine. The same way if it's denied on the subnet and allowed on the NIC card, man, it won't even get to the NIC card because it has been denied on the subnet. So thanks, man. So this is just telling you the NSGs, what are actually involved, the source, the destination, the service, which I call the protocol, the priority number, like I said, the lower the number, the higher the priority. And I'll just explain what the application security group is. Now we've got different virtual machines. We'll logically want to, put in a group. They are not within the same subnet. We need to assign this NSG to it. What I can do is just to add all these guys on ASG, then assign that particular NSG to it. Boom. Or associate that NSG. Don't let me say assign, because like I've said, it can only be assigned on subnet, but you can actually use, let me put this way, you can use the ASG with your NSG, so it's just to make it like an extension of that particular security. So it wraps the ASG with an NSG for added security. But majorly, what you're trying to do is to logically, group those virtual machines, regardless of where they are. But like I said, they all need to be within the same virtual network, for you to be able to, associate an ASG to them. So what you are trying to do is, instead of assigning this particular NSG to this NIC card of this machine, assigning it to this, creating another one, assigning to this NSG card, why not, have something that you can actually assign at once? It makes everything consistent, so you can have ASG and add everything, then assign it, to that particular to those particular machines. And that's why you can see now we have the web servers, application layer servers, we just put everything together, then we put the same set of rules to them with the help of our ASG. Network security group. How do we create network security? I just showed you how you can actually create the inbound, so you can actually look at the outbound and the likes. Any question before we go ahead to host your domain on Azure DNS? This is going to be different from what we've been discussing, but I've mentioned this why I was trying to explain how to route. Like I said, I was like, all applications. That's why when you type in Google, or you do you try to trace where Google is, if you go to your system and you try to ping google.com, it's going to tell you, it's going to give out like something like, let me see, but that's not going to be the main IP though. But I'm going to, because of there are some things at the back end. Let's see. So a typical example, or typical, is if I do ping google.com, and this is going to tell me, oh, we are pinging this. Now it's not telling you reply from Google, because computer doesn't understand Google. That's a domain. It's telling you ping from this. Now this is like an allegedly IP address, because this is not where the google.com is actually, because for better security also, there are some services that we put in front of the workload, just to take the traffic. I was talking about the application gateway, which is like a load balancer. It comes with what we call the WAF, which is the web application firewall. What that does is, I now said, when you want to associate your IP address to that particular application gateway, there is something we call the front end configuration, and that's where you apply your, or associate your IP address to. Now google.com also, let's say, is behind an application gateway. Now when you want to access google.com, it's not just going to take you to the workload or to the virtual machine that is hosting google.com. is only going to take you to that application gateway. So the IP address you're going to be seeing is the application gateway IP address and not the machine where google.com is being hosted. So this one, and that's where we call the proxy address. So you guys might have heard of proxy address and the like. So, but at least we are getting a reply, from somewhere. Now, that reply comes from, a resource, and that's the IP address of that resource. It's not saying google.com reply from Google, because the computer doesn't understand google.com. Like I've explained, it only understands 0 and 1, which are the bits. So the bits makes up this IP address. So when we have 238, so we start counting from 512. No, 512 is not going to be involved now. We have 128, 64, 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, 1. Then we start adding them up until we get to 238. So if I'm to get to 238 now, the best one to add will be the 128 initially. If I add 64 to the 128, yes, I'm still not at 238. So we have 164, 128, then 64. Then we look at with 32 go over. If I add 32, will it go over 238? Or if I add 16, 8 or something like that. That's how we add until we get to the 238. And that's how the computer interprets it, because at the end of the day, the computer is going to break down all these 142 you can see also into that 128, 64, everything, so it's just going to come in the sense of 0 1 1 1 1 1, something like that. But but if you want to do decimal, you can tell me. That's going to be a different class on its own. But you can look at binary numbers and see how the computer does the calculation. So we have this coming from this particular IP, and this IP, like I said, is what the computer understand. We don't understand this. Every time I want to go to google.com, imagine now you tell me to visit 142.168. Let me even copy this. Let's see something. And I pick one of these guys, and I'd say, boom. So this is going to take me back to google.com. You understand? Because that's where the IP address, that's what the, imagine every time I want to, I want to access google.com, then I need to go and count that IP address. That's not easy for me. I'd rather just go with the domain name. And that's what the DNS does. So we have what we call the domain name system. When you try to access google.com, what's happening is it's going to look it up. It's going to look up that domain from somewhere and say that domain is associated with this IP address. Okay, this is the system that this guy wants to access. And that's when you are now going to be presented with whatever you're looking for. But it happens within seconds, milliseconds, but you won't even know that lots of things happen in the back end. A typical interview question for a developer is, what happens when you type in google.com? And what they are trying to understand is your networking knowledge. You trying to you being able to explain all these protocols, ARP, RARP, conversion, the layers and the like. So if you want to, you can type in that question. You will always see the typical developer question. I've been asked also as a DevOps engineer when I was applying as a DevOps engineer. So it's a question you might not want to be shy away from. Even you can be asked as a cloud engineer if you go for a cloud engineer interview. So you can see what just happened when I type in that particular IP. So here, how do we now have this particular domain associated to this particular IP address? We now understand that we have our web application or website sitting on a particular machine. But for us to now be able to access that website that I've called babafemi.com, I need to associate that domain name with that particular server IP address. And that's where the DNS comes in. So it's not something really huge, but that is what we're going to be looking at. So what is DNS? I just explained it. The domain name system. How do we configure DNS to host your domain? Delegation of domain name. Dynamically resolving resource name by using their alias. Private DNS zone. Domain name resolution. For the demonstration, that's what we're going to be looking at here. So before we even start talking about your web application now, when you create your tenant in Azure, you are going to have what we call the initial domain. That initial domain, initially, let me put it that way, you might not be able to pick it up, to say this is what I really want. This is the initial domain I really want. Now you can see on in my own environment, you can see the name is IT360ng. The primary domain is IT360ng.com. But that wasn't the initial domain. My initial domain was IT360ng.onmicrosoft. So when you create a new tenant, automatically a .onmicrosoft domain, which we call an initial domain, is created for you. So let's go there. Then when you now feel like, oh no, I want to have another domain, a customized domain, why should I have .onmicrosoft IT360ng? Somebody is asking for your email, and I'm saying my email is babafemi@it360ng.onmicrosoft.com, and you feel like, well, what's going on? That's not, I think it's scam. That's not legit enough. So you want to have like a custom domain and the likes, and you can see I try to put in google.com. It's never going to work because I don't own the domain. This was just used for explanation purposes also. So all these ones you can see. So the ones I'm able to verify are the ones that belongs to me. But this is the initial domain that I was talking about. So you can only have one initial domain. And how is this initial domain formed? Automatically, when you're creating your tenant for the first time, Microsoft is just going to pick, your domain name and use it to create google.com. So if you create your tenant with, let's say, babafemi@gmail.com, it's not going to pick gmail.onmicrosoft.com because that has been taken since, So it's just going to do babafemi gmail.onmicrosoft.com. So it's going to form your .onmicrosoft.com, your initial domain, with whichever account you are actually creating that tenant with. But once you have actually created your tenant and you want to create a tenant from this particular tenant, then you can now decide what your .onmicrosoft will look like. Now Azure now gives you access to be able to choose at that time, But for this initial one, you will not be able to choose. But like I said, you can now start adding your domain. For us to now add a custom domain, and this is where these whatever we are actually doing within this particular module now comes in. We need to confirm that we own this domain. Because I'm not able to confirm that I own google.com, I'm not going to be able to verify it. You understand? I can add microsoft.com also, but I won't be able to verify it. I will only verify the ones that have access to the domain records, which we call the DNS record. So we've set the domain name system. I've got records. So those records are different records. We have the A record, which are used for web application access. We have the TST record. We have the mail record. Depending on what record you are trying to do with that particular domain. If it's for email, if it's for accessing, or you want to associate it with a virtual machine IP, so that people can access that your web application. If it's just for you to confirm that you own this particular domain, you might leverage on TST. If it's for email, you have what we call the MS record. If it's for web application asset, we have what we call the A record. So all these records are what makes up what we call the DNS system, the DNS. So I don't know why this is not opening, but so just keep it. So, but like I said, for you to be able to use this, yes, this is a typical one. Let's say it's a Microsoft.com. Now it's telling me, fine, you can add Microsoft domain. It has been added, but you need to confirm that you own Microsoft.com, the domain. Now you need to go and put this in your domain name system. You need to add this record to wherever you are managing this particular domain from. So this domain, because I want to add it here, I need to go and, maybe you bought it from Mailchimp, you bought it from what are all these domain, GoDaddy, Hostinger, HostGator, all those domain, those organizations that sells domain. So because you manage your domain there, you have access to the domain name record, the domain name system record. So there you can go in there and add this record, and with that I'll be able to verify, my domain within this tenant. But if not, that domain is just going to stay there, and it's going to say unverified because it cannot verify that I own that particular domain. So an initial domain, like I said, is going to be assigned or appended to your domain, to your tenant, which we call the .microsoft domain. Then from there you can start adding a custom domain. But for you to add a custom domain, like I said, you need to demonstrate the ownership of that custom domain. And how do you do that? You need to now add that particular record, to the domain name record. Now Azure has got its own DNS system where you can add all those records. Let's say you bought that particular domain from Azure, you have access to the DNS zone, or you just want to point your domain to Azure, then you can create what we call the DNS zone to host those records for that particular domain. I wish I just keep trying. I want to show you guys also. I want to show you the DNS zones, how it looks like. Okay. I hope this opens so that we can see. So, but you guys should understand the, what I'm trying to drive at here. We are just making sure that, whatever domain that we have here, or whatever domain we want to add, it's not compulsory. It's not just for the fact that we want to add it within as a custom domain in Azure. If you want to have it on your web application, you need to also verify that you own that particular domain. And how do I say that? Like this room store that I've got here, now I can actually add records to this particular guy. So if this, so I've created, so the way it works is I've created a web application. I've created an application, maybe in a .NET application. Now I've hosted it on a web app. Now on the web app, now it's going to come with the domain of the web app, the initial domain of the web app, something like maybe babafemi at babafemi.azurewebsites.com or something like that. But I do not want that. I want a custom domain. I just want that babafemi.com. I don't want babafemi.azurewebsite.com. No, because .azurewebsite.com, doesn't make any sense to me. I need to add a custom domain to it. And how do I add a custom domain to it? Because I want to associate that domain with that particular IP address of where the Azure web app is actually hosted on. I need to add a record. So here, if I click on add a record, I hope this open fine. Now there are different types of domain of record that you can have. This particular IPv4, you can see this is where I'm going to be adding the IP address of the machine, and this is where Google added their own IP address. This IP address you can see here, this is where they added it, not on Azure. They've got their own domain name zone system also, but this is like what they've done. So if I put in the name here, I just put something like a, and what this does is, because of this guy, I'm mapping this particular domain name, which is rimstores.com, to this particular IP address. So now when you access this rimstore.com, it's going to take you to this particular address, and on this address is where the web application is. And that's why when you type in google.com, it just takes you to google.com. You can see it. But the thing is, it has actually routed you to to that particular machine, which is hosting google.com, and that's what the DNS zone does. So here you can add whatever you need to add. So this one, because I own this particular these domains, I can decide to add them on the Azure environment also as my custom domain. But if I add them there within the enter ID that I just showed you, I will be able to create local accounts within my environment. I'll be able to create users accounts with that particular domain. So if I want to have users within my Azure environment that has maybe a username with babafemi at rimstore.com, then I need to go and add this. And what I need to just do is to add the TST record, like it was shown to all the other time, to verify that I own that domain. And this is the same way we add it when we are actually hosting a web application on that particular domain, or we want to associate a domain to a web application that we have created. So we need what we call the DNS zone, and that's all that's been explained here. So everything you'll be seeing here is just what I've explained. Here you have this domain, you want to make sure that it's being hosted, or you want to associate this particular domain to a web application. You want to use a custom domain within the Azure environment, or you just even want to have like a child or domain, like you want to have something like azure.azureadmin inc.org. So you can create a subdomain. Whatever you want to do, everything needs to be managed from here. So you use the DNS zone to manage the record of that particular domain. So, and this is just you trying to resolve the alias. Just like I've said, you want to have hello.azureadmin.inc.org. What you need to do is add this guy, then add the IP address that you want to have this redirected to. So depending on the type of record that you want to set, you can actually do it from the DNS zone. So there's nothing really happening here, just the same thing. This guy is talking about the private DNS zone. We just talked about the public DNS zone where people want to access from outside. Now, what if we want to do this within our organization? Instead of assigning a public IP address to that particular domain, we want to just assign a private IP address within the organization. So if anyone wants to access within the organization, it's just going to redirect to the private IP instead of so when you have this subdomain is attached to this particular IP address, if you access this, it's going to redirect you to this because it's internal. But when we want to put this as external, we need to have an IP address that is public. So that's nothing really is happening. It's just this guy talking about the private DNS zones and the public DNS zones. It's just the same thing. It all depends on where the traffic is actually coming from, where the traffic is actually going to. Any question? We are getting there, to be a cloud engineer, it wouldn't happen overnight, but we are just going to get there.
We'll need to go and review it again.
But yeah, that's what I'm saying. You review, but all I need you when you come to this class is to understand the concept, and that's it.
Okay.
So review, do the labs, and come back to the class if you have got any question. Any other person, anything
But
you want
Femi,
me to?
we usually
Yes.
have let me say me, when I go to watch the video again, it's always very low.
Yeah, like I said, I'm working on that. I hope it works fine today. If not, um, I will dedicate this week to test it thoroughly. I'm so sure you understand how busy I can be sometimes.
I do.
But I would try to dedicate this week to solve it or sort it out. If it's actually the same thing, if I go back to LinkedIn now to hear whatever I'm doing. But you don't have to listen to this one if it's low. I've got the playlist for Azure Administrator already there, and it's almost like a recap or like a clone of whatever we are doing here. But it's just because this one is we're actually trying to become an AI specialist. So we are starting from we've got a roadmap. And not just one course. So we've got 6 courses that we're looking at. So, but it doesn't matter. I've got videos of Azure administrators that you can leverage.
Okay.
Any other thing? Question, addition, subtraction, challenges. If not, I'll call it a day.